Boo. Hello, welcome to The Book Thing. My name is Mark, and I don't want anyone to be alarmed. That wasn't really a ghost at the start of the video. That was me. And I didn't have to use AI or anything. I just put a sheet over my head. Halloween top tip for you. Horror was a massive part of my formative reading years. I loved the classics like Dracula and Frankenstein, and in my teens I devoured everything by the likes of James Herbert and Stephen King that I could get my hands on. In recent years I haven't been reading quite so much horror, but since being on BookTube I've started to read more and more horror books, and there is a wealth of horror out there, both classic and contemporary. But sometimes when it gets to spooky season, the one thing you really want is just a good old ghost story. So here is a list of 10 great ghost stories for you to read this Halloween. These are in no particular order of preference, so I'm going to start with the earliest one of these that was published, and that is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. This, of course, is the story of the English teacher Ichabod Crane, who is tormented by the legendary Headless Horseman. One of the things I loved about this book is that it's a lot more ambiguous as to what actually happened to Ichabod Crane. On the surface, he had the encounter with the supernatural horseman, but as you look at it, perhaps his experience had more to do with his the love triangle that he was in with Katrina and the local Brom Bones, and less to do with the supernatural. When I was planning this video, I saw a video by Jen at Literary Love 123, and she talked about some books to read for spooky season as well, and she mentioned The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and one of the things that she pointed out, which I thought was really interesting, was that actually if you scratch beneath the surface of the book, it possibly has a lot more to do with the rivalry between English and Dutch settlers than anything else. I'll put the link to Jen's video down below because she recommends some other excellent books, including The Old Nurse's Tale by Elizabeth Gaskell, which I hadn't read until Jen recommended it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it as another ghost story for this season. Next up, we've got Charles Dickens, and obviously his most well-known ghost story is A Christmas Carol, but the one I want to talk about is The Signalman. This is the story of an unnamed narrator who meets a signalman on the railways who tells him this tale about this ghostly apparition that he has seen a number of times, and every single time he has seen it, it has been the harbinger of disaster on the railway. It's a suitably creepy short story that you can find in the collection Mugby Junction, and it really nicely sets up a nice climax to the story that has a bit of a sting in the tail. Now I'm going to turn to the undisputed king of horror, Mr. Stephen King. And if we're going to talk about a Stephen King ghost story, then I think you can't go far wrong with The Shining. This is the story, of course, of Jack Torrance, who takes his family up to the Overlook Hotel in Colorado, where he's going to work over winter as the caretaker when the hotel has been snowed in. The family are entirely isolated up there, and Jack is using the time to write his novel. But he and his son Danny are plagued by some of the memories that are in the hotel that manifest themselves as various different spirits. This is a fantastic story. It is suitably creepy and scary, and also plays as a metaphor for alcoholism and the massive detrimental impact that it can have on families. Next up is a story which is supposed to be true, and that is The Amityville Horror by Jay Anson. This is the story of the Lutz family who move into a house in Amityville, Long Island, the site that was formerly home to a notorious murderer and the site where he killed his entire family. Within a month, the Lutz family had fled the house, leaving most of their possessions behind them. And this is the story of the 28 days in between them moving in and moving out and everything that befell them in the interim. I'm a bit of a cynic, and reading the Amityville Horror, it is not that surprising to me that it came out just a couple of short years after The Exorcist did, because a lot of the scary things that took place feel very much along the lines of the demonic possession that happened in The Exorcist. So if you're going into this looking for a true story, I suspect you're going to be pretty disappointed, as it has been fairly widely regarded as a hoax ever since. But if you're going into this looking for a documentary style horror story, then Amityville Horror is suitably creepy and fun. Next up, we've got The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. And even though this was written in the 80s, this very much feels like a Victorian Gothic horror. This is the story of Arthur Kipps, who as an older man is telling the story of when he was younger as a young solicitor and had to go to Eelmarsh House in order to wrap up the affairs of the lady who died there. It is a house that is extraordinarily isolated at the best of times, and because it is connected to the mainland with a tidal causeway for large parts of the day, it is completely physically isolated as well. And this is about his encounter with the eponymous Woman in Black. This is a great, scary, creepy story and really feels like an excellent homage to the Victorian Gothic horror story. I can't have every ghost story on this list, and I've left out some obvious choices like The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson and The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. And I have controversially left those out because I don't like those stories that much. So if you think I'm wrong and I should have added one of those two in, or if you've got a favourite ghost story that I haven't mentioned, please put it in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you think. Next up, we've got Haunted by James Herbert, which is a bit of a subversion of the classic ghost story. This is the story of David Ash, a paranormal investigator and professional cynic who goes to supposed sites of hauntings and supernatural activity and debunks the lot of them. He tries to find physical and explainable reasons why the unexplainable things have happened, and he has been extraordinarily successful at that. The institute that David works for is written to by Miss Webb, who asked for David to come and investigate the paranormal goings-on in their house. He arrives at the household to meet Miss Webb as well as her adult nephews and niece, and starts to experience some things which he isn't quite able to explain and suspects he's being pranked by the family. It's a really nice subversion of the haunted house genre and definitely worth a read. Next up, I have got what is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most bonkers ghost story on this list, and that is Ring by Koji Suzuki. This was originally written in Japanese, and in its native Japan, Ring is a phenomenon. It has got a huge series of books, mangas, multiple film adaptations, and TV series. This is the story of a haunted videotape, which, if watched, the viewer will die in 7 days. If you don't know what a videotape is, you're too young to be watching my channel. You're making me feel old. Go away. If this story sounds familiar, you may well have seen the American version, The Ring, although that is more of an adaptation of the original Japanese film Ring than it is an adaptation of the novel. And the reason being is because the novel is mental. If it sounds like a relatively simple concept, and if you've seen the American film and seen the simplicity of the story, it's a bit more complicated than that in the book. There is a whole lot of things going on with sanitariums and the smallpox virus and all of that sort of thing, and it's a very, very strange but atmospheric book. This might be the one occasion where I'd say I prefer the film to the book, and again, I don't mean the American version, I mean the Japanese version. But the book, if you want something a bit trippy and weird as well as spooky, it's worth a read. Next up, we've got Stephen King's son, the fantastic Mr. Joe Hill, and his ghost story, Heart-Shaped Box. This is the story of the aging rock star Judas Coyne, who's largely retired to his house out in the country in upstate New York and spending his money on various different macabre artifacts to add to his collection when he sees an advertisement to buy a ghost. The ghost is associated with an old suit which arrives at Jude's place in a heart-shaped box, and Jude gets the ghost that he paid for, but maybe not everything that he counted on. A lot of these ghost stories are about how the ghost is scaring our protagonist. This is a story about how the ghost is actively trying to cause our protagonist harm, and this is a suitably creepy ghost story, and for rock music fans, there's plenty of references in there for you to enjoy as well. Next up is the most recently published book, and the book that prompted me to make this list in the first place, and that is Dark Matter by Michelle Paver. This is a story set in the 1930s and from the perspective of Jack Miller, where we're reading his journal entries about his expedition to Svalbard, or Spitsbergen as it's called at the time, in the Arctic Circle, where they're going on this Arctic expedition. And as the expedition starts to lose the light in the Arctic winter, it seems like the place they've chosen to settle for their base camp, they're not alone there. This story is like the unholy union between Susan Hill's The Woman in Black and John W. Campbell's Who Goes There, the short novella that was adapted to make the film The Thing by John Carpenter. So what you get is the isolation of the main character, like you have in The Woman in Black, ramped up to the nth degree by the fact that they are in Arctic conditions, like you get in Who Goes There. Antarctic conditions in that one, but you know what I mean. This is genuinely creepy and a phenomenal read. I highly recommend picking this up. And for the last book I've chosen, I wanted to choose a ghost story that didn't have a ghost in it. So what I wanted was a story that had all of the atmosphere and the trappings of a traditional gothic ghost story, but without necessarily having a ghost in it. I had 4 books that I was trying to choose from in this, and they were Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, and then the one that I finally settled on, which is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. So if you were disappointed by me leaving out The Haunting of Hill House, I didn't completely snub Shirley Jackson. Now this is a story of Mary Catherine Blackwood, or Mary Cat, who lives with her sister Constance and her uncle Julian in a large house outside of a New England town. The Blackwood family have suffered this tragedy where the entire rest of the family have been poisoned, and Constance, Mary Cat's sister, was blamed, tried for it, but ultimately acquitted. Even so, the rest of the town have ostracized the Blackwood family and treated them entirely as outcasts. So this is almost like the origin story for a haunted house. It has all of the atmosphere, it has all of the backstory, and it has the backstory taking place as we see it happen in real time. It is thoroughly enjoyable, very, very creepy, and this might be a recency bias for me, but I highly, highly recommend We Have Always Lived in the Castle. So that was my 10 ghost stories for Halloween. How about you? What do you think is a good ghost story for Halloween? Thanks a million for watching, really appreciate you taking the time to do that, and take care.